The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. It's brought to you in association with West Yorkshire Electrical, who don't just do electricals now. Fully accredited electrician, but now have their own roofing team because they are specialists in renewables. They do loads and loads of solar panels, so you don't want cowboys on your roof. Get the pros in. West Yorkshire Electrical, now with their own team of roofers. Can't say better than that. wyelectrical.co.uk for details there. You can find them on your socials as well. And of course, they do all the usual range of electrical services. Michael will probably reel off the big three if he was here at the minute, but he doesn't work the Monday show, does he, Phil? So it's just me and you flying solo today.
Yes, you'll need to do the big three. I'm not quite as free as you.
Big three, Phil, what? Solar panel installation, battery storage, EV charging for your home or your business, security alarm, CCTV. There's more than three there. I could go on, but they're all on the website. If it's got wires, basically, they will work with it. You've got finance available for work on your home or your business, wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Let's get into it then, shall we? We've got actually a little bit more to review than we think because we had the game on Friday night and we recorded ahead of the transfer deadline. So let's start with the end, which was the victory on Friday night at Bristol. And I don't know about you. I mean, from a fan's perspective, and do you agree from a journalist's perspective that game, it was one of those tests that was put in front of Leeds, which they failed to overcome it earlier in the season against the likes of, let's say, Stoke and Sunderland, whereas this time with Bristol, they did overcome it and got a well-deserved victory. And I don't know if I'm kind of reverse engineering the outcome now to how I feel or what, but it feels to me like Leeds are heading in a good direction at the minute. Like maybe there's a little bit of momentum building up.
Oh, more than a little. That's five straight wins. And I think significantly as well, two of them away from home in games that, on paper at least, were quite similar to a few of the fixtures that they'd lost prior to the turn of the year. And I don't think it is, I don't think we're inventing anything here to say that they've started to find solutions in the sort of games that were becoming problematic for them. Cardiff was obviously far more comfortable than the Bristol City win. But and in no way was it exactly the same game, but there were similarities in the way that Leeds were strong from start to finish, didn't have long spells in the game where they looked like they were in trouble or looked like they were going to give anything away. There was that one chance for Bristol City in the second half, which Melee saved. But Farke was right afterwards when he was saying to us that he was, he looked at that game as one that Leeds should have won by a wider margin. And I think the way he put it to us was that he was annoyed about the fact that they didn't take more of the chances and they weren't more ruthless, weren't more efficient in front of goal. But I think really deep down, he was absolutely delighted with that result. It was a cold and it was a wet, blustery night at Ashton Gate. They're a very mixed side, Bristol City. They've got mid-table all over them, I think, and you could see that in their performance as well. But I don't think that made it an easy game at all, particularly with the scheduling of it. Important as well, I think, to get that result on the board, given the games that are now coming up and the amount of travelling that Leeds will have to do down to Swansea and Plymouth twice. But all in all, I just think that it is a case of, a team who are now finding solutions in these games. And they were the better side comfortably against Bristol City. I didn't feel like the game was going to end in anything other than an away win. And big for Gnonto as well, I think. I'd written at the start of the week after the FA Cup game against Plymouth that he really is the one attacking resource that Farke hasn't been able to tap into properly this season. You could almost say the same of Anthony, but I think the difference with Anthony is that he's on loan from Bournemouth with no permanent option there, so no bigger picture around him. But Gnonto is a player who's on a long contract, a contract that Leeds want to extend, and it just hasn't got going for him since the saga of the summer. So that was a big moment, and I think you could see it in his body language, his reaction to the away end, the punch towards the away end, that he needed that, and he knew it was a big moment for him. And if he starts to come out of his shell at this point, in the way that Bamford's come to the fore as well, then it will do this season absolutely no harm. And psychologically, I think being second, even for, a matter of hours, is a big deal.
It's a little bit like training for the Olympics, isn't it? You do all your build-up work and then you want it so you're peaking at the right time. So hopefully Leeds can now peak for the run-in. And maybe we've seen Ipswich going off the boil and they put in a pretty drab and dismal performance at Preston, particularly in that first half, some woeful defending that suggests maybe they're not at the races at the minute. Yeah. I'm fully aware as well that these things can turn.
They definitely can turn. I think that was a pretty damaging result for them on Saturday. And as you say, there'll be concerns about the performance. And I think that will worry McKenna and others at Ipswich more than some of the games they've had recently. When we were chatting about them a couple of podcasts ago, we were sort of making the point that on the one hand, the form had slipped and they weren't winning games at anything like the same rate as they were earlier in the season. But on the other, you couldn't pretend that they'd had anything like an easy fixture list. You know, it'd been Leicester twice, it'd been Norwich at home. They'd obviously had to come to Elland Road. I think if you were being pragmatic about it, it was, you know, it was fair to take that fixture list and say, well, there was likely to be a point in that where points started to spill. But that result, I know Leeds lost at Deepdale themselves, but it was poor by their standards for Ipswich. And I, in no way is it boiled down to a two-horse race for second place. Ipswich are still close enough, still have, you know, played fewer games than Leeds, so could get themselves back into that position quite quickly. But it has felt over the, you know, the past month, 2 months, that from Leeds' perspective, the real threat to second place is Southampton. That's how it looks. And I still think that Leicester, you know, far enough ahead to be pretty sure of a top two finish and probably pretty sure of the title. And I felt from Leicester's perspective, it was quite telling that having had the, you know, the scenario last week where they almost got Sensi from Inter Milan, it didn't happen at the last minute. It was a bit of a shambles. You could tell that Maresca wasn't delighted about what was happening with transfers. There seemed to be a bit of peculiar, I thought, but a bit of grumbling amongst the crowd. You know, an absolute rout for them at the weekend without missing a beat. They're in great shape and they do look like they're going up.
If you want a little crumb of comfort, Phil, where Southampton are concerned, and I will give credit to AWOL, who's the poster on Wacko on the thread about the chasing pack, has pointed out that throughout the entire season, Southampton have only won 3 games against the entire top half in their 29 games played so far. That's once against West Brom, once against Hull, and against us, and that's it. So that 21 game unbeaten run, it's a myth, Phil. It's not even real.
Doesn't exist. Well, you know, they are going to hit some hard fixtures at some stage, and one of the most difficult for them is going to be Elland Road on the last day of the season. The only caveat there being that the attention on that game and what surrounds it is going to depend entirely on how the table looks. And I would imagine that they would very much be hoping in going for second place that they can turn that into a dead rubber. And that they deal with what they have to deal with before that, you know, that becomes live. But that has the potential to be, you know, hell for leather, that fixture. And it would be absolutely great if it was. I mean, I know sometimes that limiting the tension is a good thing. But those are the days that tend to stick with you. You know, those are the days that are so good to cover because it's all or nothing. And I think it has the potential to go that way. You know, I think they are going to be, it's going to be very tight, I feel, to the end of the season now. But I think the good thing for Leeds, and Farker has tried every time we speak to him and every time we ask him about the division, about promotion, even about the transfer window. I sort of asked him last Wednesday, what have you made of what's going on elsewhere? And he just get that kind of stock response of, you know, I haven't really paid a huge amount of attention to it, and what's happening elsewhere, you know, doesn't particularly influence what Leeds need to do in the market. I think the way he put it was that even if you're having 2 or 3 signings at another club, it doesn't make you panic and doesn't make you think, right, we need to do something ourselves. And I think also, you know, not every signing that's being made at a different club would fit into your squad anyway. So to take David Brooks at Southampton, I think that's a great signing for them. And I can see how he would have fitted at Leeds, but I'm not sure how much game time he would have got. I don't think last week you're sitting saying Leeds should have done David Brooks. You're still sitting there saying Leeds need to do a right back. You know, that is the big priority. That is the one position that they need to cover. And it's the position that they have covered. And I think they've done better than cover it in Connor Roberts. I mean, he's been highly proven championship right back for a long time now. We went to see him before the signing was announced on Thursday. We went down just to do a bit of media with him at Elland Road. And it's hard not to like the cut of his jib. You know, he's clearly got a bit of an attitude, which is great. You know, he's quite a spiky guy. He was talking about how much he likes a scrap on the pitch, how much he likes to get stuck in, how much he enjoys the needle. But you can also just hear him what he says, the confidence of somebody who knows the drill in the Championship, has seen it before, has been through, you know, the playoffs with Swansea a couple of times, won the title with Burnley. This is absolutely his, you know, familiar hunting ground. He seemed delighted to be here. He wasn't making much secret about the fact that he'd quite like this to be long term, if it could be at the end of the loan. And I think, you know, from a technical perspective and as a player, I think it's a good signing. But I also think there'll be some real value in having him in the dressing room.
Two things then on that stuff you just said, Phil. First of all, is that if it does come down to a final day showdown against Southampton, which it'd be a day for the ages, wouldn't it? I don't think that's something to necessarily be scared of, because if you break it down, a day like that is going to come in the season at some point where Leeds need to win to go up, if we are to go up. So whether that is just a home game or an away game, whatever it might be, or whether it's that game against Southampton, whether it's the playoff final, if we're going to go up, a day will come where we have to achieve that. So I think it's nothing to be scared of. It's something we should embrace and potentially look forward to. I know the stakes are so high with stuff like that, but
yeah, we'll totally revisit this in the week before the game itself, when it's all on the line, and we'll work out whether or not there's any tension at that point. I'm with you though, as an occasion. I mean, I think back to Middlesbrough Brighton at the Riverside when it was, it was absolutely all or nothing, and I think crucially as well, it wasn't as if that was set up in a way where one team in particular were massively favoured. Middlesbrough had the slight edge. Middlesbrough knew exactly what they had to do, but Brighton could easily have gone up that day too. It was 100% all on the line, and it will, from as a spectacle, it'd be terrific if that's how it ends up. In saying that, I don't think anybody in Leeds is going to be moaning if Leeds have got it wrapped up before that point either.
The other point, Phil, was about maybe is there a sweet spot for players? And we saw this very much with, and I'm going to drop the B-bomb again, the Bielsa squad, the likes of Luke Ayling, Stuart Dallas, Liam Cooper, and so on and so forth. Is there a sweet spot for players? And I wonder, is this reflected in what was said by Connor Roberts, where they come to Leeds as the biggest club they will ever play for, and they'll find a home here, and they maintain perhaps a level of hunger that drives them forward, and perhaps it's something that can be missing, that hunger when it comes to the sort of the next level up, the next tier up of signings. Where they don't really have anything to prove. They've come in on big fees, that kind of thing. We saw the transition towards that type of player not really work at Leeds in the sort of couple of years after we went up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you asked that, because Robert said to us when we were speaking to him, about the move itself. He was telling us that he'd always wanted to play for Leeds, and there was a long-standing joke in Scottish football about a guy called Mo Johnston who played for Rangers and Hearts and various other clubs, and he had this habit of turning up to every single club he signed for and saying, "I've always wanted to play for X," and it became his kind of stock trademark phrase. But Roberts was saying to us, I didn't grow up as a Leeds fan. I've never been a Leeds fan, but I've always wanted to play for this club. And we were like, well, why is that? And he said it's just the appeal. He made, you might remember, he made his first ever championship appearance at Elland Road for Middlesbrough. Didn't have a good day that day, I have to say. It wasn't a great day for Gary Monk when Middlesbrough didn't play well and were pretty soundly beaten by Leeds.
Did the group not perform, Phil?
No, I don't think they did. I don't actually think him picking Roberts that day especially helped his stock at Middlesbrough. It wasn't too long after that Monk ran into trouble there. But Roberts has developed massively. He's a very young player at that point. He's developed hugely since then. And he said he loved the atmosphere when he came and played here, and it just felt like a club that would be a good fit for him. I'm talking about liking needle and niggle and liking a scrap. I mean, that to a large degree is what Leeds are about. And he said other players had said to him, you'd fit in there. You'd suit that place because of the way you are, because of your temperament and your personality. But he did also say that, in his view, there is something that is more special about achieving big things with big clubs, clubs that have big reputations, big histories, big fan bases. And that was part of the lure for him. On Friday after the game, it was the first chance we'd had to speak to Farker about that signing in particular. And we got into talking about Roberts being Welsh, and Farker joked himself of almost got the whole of the Wales national team here. But I do think there's something good and positive in that. And I decided to write about it on Friday because I think it's quite relevant. And it goes without saying that Leeds aren't signing any of these players, Ampadu, Rodon, Roberts, because they're Welsh per se. There's nothing unique about Welsh footballers. But the Welsh national team for a long time now has had this tier of players who are amply good enough for the championship, and clearly are, and it almost makes sense that would be the type of footballer that you would be trying to get hold of if you were wanting to get promoted. And it's also true that these guys are really tight, they're kind of thick as thieves. Roberts, Rodon, Ampadu, Dan James, and that cannot be a bad thing in your dressing room. It's problematic if that sort of thing becomes cliquey, but I don't think that's how it is. I think these are all genuinely good personalities, genuinely good characters. And given how much Farke talks about, you know, the right character and that needing to be an aspect of recruitment and the transfer strategy, you can see why he would be going for this crowd, not because they're Welsh specifically, but because they do know each other. They've worked together before, they've worked well together before, and you always need in a dressing room a good solid core that everybody else can orbit around.
Was going to say, we've spoken before about like the leadership group, and it's a phrase I know that Jesse Marsh used it, but it was put in place when Bielsa was here, wasn't it? And I know we keep falling back on Bielsa, but it was the last time it worked at this level in a sort of serious capacity. There's that core.
But it's almost gone. You know, that this is the thing. They've been trimming away at that leadership group to the point where really Liam Cooper is the only one, in an active sense, the only one left. There is still Stuart Dallas, but obviously Dallas has had this injury for a long time, so is around and is involved. But you know, on the footballing front, hasn't played for almost 2 years now. So it is having to be replaced by others, and it's a younger core, definitely younger group. Rodon, Ampadu, you know, are earlier in their careers, and likewise Roberts. And it's almost funny looking at Roberts at 28, you know, with the title behind him and a couple of playoff campaigns with Swansea, and thinking that he represents somebody ultra experienced in that dressing room. But it's a fact, because it is a very young dressing room, and there are lots of young players who haven't been through this before. And I do think there will come a stage in the season where it's still about talent, it's still about ability, it's still about the quality of a team, but it is also going to come down to who's got a pair at the crucial moment. And I think they will find in Roberts that they've got a really good competitor, very good right back as well. Although, if I'm being fair to Archie Gray, I don't think Archie Gray on Friday was in any way opening the door to Roberts coming into the team. You know, I thought he played really well at Ashton Gate. But you know, that to me is a really good signing, Roberts. I think it is. And I say again, I think it's a really good signing in the position where they had to get somebody.
Yeah, just what you were saying there about the leadership group was the point I was kind of angling at before as well, the failure to replace it. And they put in place quite a young group of successors, didn't they, in terms of signings and things like that. And that sort of mid-20s group didn't really exist in order to kind of pick up the mantle from the older players and just have it all as a more sort of gradual continuum rather than just bringing in a load of players that were young and were expected to kind of make things happen. Like, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about Willie Gnonto and his misdeeds this season. He's still a very young man. And I know there are plenty of teenagers in our squad who've not rocked the boat, but, you know, not everybody's the same, are they? And he's made a mistake, and it feels like at least he's trying to atone for that mistake now anyway.
The crucial thing in those situations is that if, as Farke did, you decide to bring him back into the fold, you then have to start getting form out of him and performances out of him. And it has been difficult. It's partly been difficult because Somerville and Dan James haven't been making it easy to get into this team in the positions where Gnonto would really like to play. And I think James has had an excellent season, but I think Somerville has been better again. And Somerville, I think, if truth be told, is probably in the position where Gnonto would most like to be playing, you know, would most like to be on the left, certainly on the basis of how it went for him last season. But it has been a case of, you know, opportunities on the right-hand side of the pitch, which I think hasn't seemed to suit him quite so much, but I think it's far more to it than that, isn't there? It just it didn't get going for him this season because of the situation in August, and because of the kind of conflict and friction between him and the club was just not a good start. But now that this window is closed, Gnonto knows that he's going to be here until the end of the season at least. He knows that he's got the Euros coming up. You would think there'd be a lot of motivation there to knuckle down, not least the kind of scent of promotion as well, which is a big thing to have on your CV. And certainly Roberts, you know, very proud of the fact that he won the title with Burnley. I think very proud as well of the seasons that he'd had at Swansea when they went really close. But just to touch back on that leadership group, I think, you know, Roberts has clearly been here and done it before, so he knows the drill. But I'm starting to look at Rodon and think, you know, he looks like a player who's been promoted from this division before. Like his body language and his attitude and the way he's playing, he just looks like he's got it in hand, and he knows that he can cope with it. I do wonder at this rate, when Struijk comes back, and that'll be in 2 or 3, 4 weeks' time, something like that, when he's fit to play again. I do wonder what Farke will do with the centre of his defence, because I don't think it's a straightforward decision at the moment to break up that pairing of Rodon and Ampadu. It's looking really good.
I know we're slaloming all over the place here, Phil, but yeah, just to go back to the Roberts signing, just strikes me as eminently sensible. Like much of the business that we've done this season has just it's felt obvious. It's kind of the thing that we were perhaps lacking a little bit with the moonshot signings under Victor Orta. Everything Victor Orta did wasn't necessarily bad or good. Plenty of misses in there, some hits as well. You look at Rafinha, for example, was absolutely outstanding business for the club, wasn't he? But these are all, even if they're not that exciting, they're very, very obvious and solid signings that are giving us perhaps that foundation that you could argue we lacked previously.
Well, as we were going through, Leeds were never pretending they were going to do much in January. And as we were going through the month, with nothing materialising, the club were trying to make the point to us that they were slightly wary of just wading into something they could do quickly at the expense of then not being able to do something that they really wanted to do later in the window because they've already covered that position. And, Roberts was on the list of targets right from the start at right back, same as Nico Williams and others, another Welshman. And he does fit. He does fit. And I think the good thing as well is you kind of strengthen him from a position of strength. There's no crisis at right back at the moment, but there is a shortage of options and a shortage of bodies there. And also with Gray and Shackleton, you're talking about two kind of hybrid fullbacks there, midfielders really. And I know Shackleton's played there quite a bit over the years, and I know Gray does that with England as well. But Gray is a central midfielder. There's no doubt about that. But what you have in Roberts is you have an actual right back who, if there comes a point in the season where you need an actual right back in there, you've got him, and that in form he will play well in this league. And I mean, on the sort of Orta front, I'm writing the next couple of days just on that emerging talent group that they threw a lot of time and money at, from kind of a few deals prior to 2020, but from promotion onwards, the Dramies and the Gelharts and the McGurks and so on. And it was McGurk leaving at the end of the window that kind of got me on to thinking about that. In a window where you saw Helder go as well, and Lewis Bate gone out on loan, will be at the end of his contract when that finishes. There are a lot of them that haven't worked. And there have been some hits. You've got to say that. There have been some successes. Somerville being a very notable one. Going back a little bit further, I think you could put Stroik and Millier into that category as well. But I think there probably haven't been enough hits all round. And again, the story of the outgoings last month, beyond really what happened with Ayling and Spence, was that more of these prospects that it just hasn't worked out for them.
Just with reference to Archie Gray, he was my man of the match for Friday. I know Nonto got it possibly for what's the word, emotional reasons. But Archie was absolutely brilliant on Friday. Just watching him is such a pleasure. He's such a good footballer. You can just see he just oozes class, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, the sort of prodigy in the squad, the biggest asset in a development sense, and really the player with most potential in that squad is another one who's been in the academy from the get-go. Gray. So many of the best players who've come through Leeds Academy, certainly recently, have been in there since like primary school age, and that is how it's proven. But as I say, you do have Somerville who came over from Feyenoord, but at a much later age. And you're right about Gray, and I did say that to Farke afterwards. That doesn't actually look like Gray is particularly creating room for Roberts to get into this team. And he just said, "Well, no, I agree. I don't think at the moment you could justifiably drop Gray on merit, even though you've got Roberts in the background." But in terms of man of the match, I've found it very difficult yet again to sway away from Rodon, who just seems to do all the right things at the right time. Comes up with big moments when you need big moments. And in his own sort of quiet way, I think he's making a real push for Player of the Year award.
Very much so, yeah. It feels like the solid defence is really starting to have a bearing on the season now. And like you were saying before, you can see Ampadu staying back there, can't you? Because they seem absolutely impervious at the minute, the pair of them.
Well, I think with Ampadu as well, over the years, he's played at centre-back a lot. So there's a debate to be had, really, about what he is. Like, is he a better centre-mid? Is he a centre-back? I think from what I've seen, I'd be, if it was my choice, I'd be playing him in the centre of midfield. But the thing is, when you have Gruev and you have Kamara, and Ampadu can play like that at centre-back, it's that thing of never wanting to disrupt a team that doesn't need shuffled around. And there isn't a huge amount that needs change with this side at the moment. Granted, they are missing some chances. And Farker's right that they could be winning by bigger margins. But actually, if you look at the expected goals calculations, then they're not far off. They're pretty much where they need to be. Conversion rate of big chances is decent. It's in the mid-40s. It's similar to Leicester. It's not far off Southampton. You could always be better. But I think Farke at the moment is at the point where he's having to find things to pick fault with rather than being spoiled for choice when it comes for things to worry about. I just think they're in a really, really good point at the minute.
And back to Plymouth on Tuesday for possibly the least wanted fixture of the entire season, this one, the FA Cup replay. But it is a chance to keep that momentum going, isn't it?
It is. And decent ties at the other side of it. Chelsea away, Villa away. I don't know how winnable you'd class either of those, although, Chelsea seem to be making a pretty extraordinary meal.
Yeah, potential banana skin there, Phil.
Well, I mean, genuinely
For us.
is. But you would be talking about one of the best sides in the Championship who are very much in the habit of winning, going to a side in the Premier League who, all the gear, no idea, and just seem to sway wildly from one thing to the next, and don't actually seem to be able to put together much in the way of good form at all. The worst of Chelsea's defeats seem to be particularly dreadful, and I would suggest that Villa is likely to be the more difficult game of the two, depending on how it turns out. I think Farke will go. He was saying that Shackleton's likely to miss tomorrow's game. He's ill. We won't have James. He won't have Strike. It's off the back of a pretty intense game at Bristol City, so you're definitely going to see changes. But I think he'll do what he's done previously in the FA Cup and actually in the League Cup as well. I think he'll make sure that he gives Leeds a chance. But a long trip he could do without, no question.
Yeah, and far be it from me to bring in home and away form into things, but Plymouth have been pretty strong at home this season. But is this, being a cup tie, is this a completely different kettle of fish?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I think in the periods where Plymouth have been good at Ellen Road, I've been sort of quietly impressed by them. But no doubt at all, I didn't think that there was enough in both the league game and the cup game, and Leeds did edge the league game, but enough in both of them for Leeds to put the game to bed before Plymouth started to get busy in it. They were probably worth a replay and a draw, I thought, in the first game, but I still think Leeds allowed that to slip to the point where Plymouth got back into it. Yeah, no, you're right. It will be different. There are other priorities. I think it goes without saying this week that if one game had to go wrong, for Farke, it can't be Saturday against Rotherham.
No. What represents then, well, a question that flows from that, what represents the ideal scenario for Leeds in this cup game on Tuesday, in your opinion?
Well, I think since you're down there, you might as well win it. And I say all the time, I can't think of too many occasions where I've thought that it was truly beneficial for Leeds to be out of the FA Cup. I know it limits your schedule and I know it prevents games getting added onto the fixture list. But I think even going back to seasons that have gone well, the correlation between out of the cup and in the cup doesn't always seem to be there. You can apply it if you want, but I'm not sure there's necessarily much to that argument. I don't think it'll do Leeds any harm if they go through. If they happen to get edged out in this game, I don't think that does them any particular damage either. And as I say, the priority as soon as that game finishes will be to get home, get set, and get ready for Rotherham, which, incredibly winnable game at home.
And we will speak about that game towards the back end of the week. Speak to you then, Phil, yeah?
Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit.
The Square Ball Podcast.